Today, the real difference on the lap was made by Max Verstappen himself, who made a sensational pole position in Suzuka. Being ahead of the two McLarens, something totally unexpected because everyone expected a McLaren fighting for the pole. I told you even yesterday it was the #1 favorite to take the first position. Instead, Verstappen made the difference and managed to stay ahead by 12 thousandths on Norris. Then indeed, Norris 2nd, Piastri 3rd, Leclerc 4th, Russell 5th, Antonelli 6th, Ajar 7th, Hamilton 8th. So Ferrari finished in 4th place with Leclerc, 8th with Hamilton, and objectively they also said it. We will also see it later with telemetry. Leclerc got the most out of the car. More than that could not be done. He said he still did a good lap, tried to optimize the package he had, but guys, Ferrari is a bit in trouble at this moment, and it's a pretty difficult period that it's going through, especially because it's not that it's not going strong. Anyway, Ferrari is going strong and manages to optimize the package it has at this moment. In this case, in Japan, it did, but the problem is that it can't excel in any area. In practice, it goes quite fast in top speed, it goes quite fast in medium-fast curves. If we want, it's not so strong in slow curves, but it's not that it has a real weak point, it goes a little less strong in many areas. So now let's go see all the details, but first please leave a like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. Let's look at the telemetry. Let's also look at Verstappen's onboard lap where he made the difference. And we also need to see what we expect for tomorrow on the race pace. A bit of my impressions on tomorrow's race, which I remind you will be Sunday at 7. So the first thing I want to show you is the times. Let's look at the times together so we can analyze them together. And then let's also look at Verstappen's onboard lap. Verstappen pole position in 1.2, 6.983, which made an incredible improvement from Q1 to Q3 because in Q1 and Q2 the pace was very similar among all the drivers. Then in Q3 Verstappen made the difference. He made a difference over all the others, including Tsunoda, who finished in 15th position. Norris performed well in qualifying until Q2, matching Verstappen's pace. However, he failed to qualify, missing out on a potential top result. Norris finished second with a 126.9, while Piastri took 1.27.0. The McLarens showed promise based on their intermediate times and sector performance. You can see that they are strong in all sectors. They are even stronger than Verstappen. Verstappen did not make a difference in any sector, but he managed to go faster on average compared to the McLarens. 4th, Leclerc, who in my opinion is already a lot to have taken this 4th position in 1.27.299, and already being ahead of the Mercedes is a big deal for him because Russell still made a mistake in the first chicane. We will see it later on. The difference between the various drivers is really minimal. In fact, if we look at Verstappen and Norris, Piastri are very close. Then there's Leclerc, who is 3/10 from Verstappen, and then Leclerc and Russell are very close, and then Antonelli is very close, instead to Ajar and Hamilton. So we can say that Leclerc was competing with Russell for that 4th place and he managed to get it. So this is already good, but obviously we expect more from Ferrari. It's not a 4th, 8th position that we wanted here at Suzuka for sure. Then indeed, Mercedes 5th with Russell, 6th with Antonelli. Antonelli, anyway, good that he got there close to his teammate Agiara. Also had a great qualifying. Pity for Hamilton, who had a clean lap. He said it himself. He suffered a lot of understeer in this case, and he and Leclerc chose different paths on the setup. Leclerc's paid off more, and it's a shame to see that Hamilton only stopped at the 8th position. Also because for tomorrow's race, obviously we expect maybe even rain or before the race or during, so we'll see a bit because the weather at Suzuka is quite unstable. And this could change the cards on the table. So I want to show you something interesting first. That is that Verstappen and Red Bull have brought updates also this weekend, and no one has talked about it, but they are fundamental because they have also changed the direction, let's say, of the flows in the rear area. In fact, they have redesigned the part of the engine cover, so the rear part to the Coca-Cola area, then the rear part of the angle where there is the suspension, and precisely the rear suspension, so they have changed those parts there by fixing the flow area, the suspension arms, so as to have an improvement in the flows as well, that reach the diffuser area and are channeled towards the rear near the tire tread. I also show the area of the modified detail, and this has certainly allowed Red Bull to improve this weekend. The underlined area, indicated by the arrow, is much cleaner. The rear part allows more air to arrive, and to the rear part. And that can be exploited both by the bean wing but also by the diffuser, so this is an important detail. Note I want to show you now the sensational lap of Verstappen. Let's go see the onboard together, let's see where he made the difference. the Dutch driver. And also, we can say this is a pole position of Verstappen, that is, he also celebrated a lot after he won it, and in my opinion he did well because he made an incredible lap, and they also said in the commentary he celebrated more for this pole almost compared to other world titles. For example, the one that he won right at Suzuka, and it's true. Guys, we saw an amazing Max. So, let's take a moment to look at the lap and let's analyze it together. And let's see where Max made a difference. But above all, I want to show you the first sector because the first sector is something amazing. So, I'm going to change for a moment. Let's move on. I want to show you Max's use of the track. Unfortunately, I have to stop a few times. Also, because... Unfortunately, I have to stop a few times because I can't show you the whole lap. Look here, already an exit from curve 1 takes advantage of the entire external curb, takes advantage of every meter of the track. But let's see here the part of insertion, use of curbs, and also use of the best trajectories in the first sector. A sector where Red Bull struggled a bit more on Tsunoda, and it can also be seen from the telemetry. Instead, the V-Stub manages to be very precise on the front end. As I've said to many, it's a very pointy car on the front end, on the front suspension. So the balance of the car also turns out to be shifted forward, and it has a very unstable rear end. In these fast curves, it's noticeable. It's easy to lose the rear end and make a mistake, as happened to Tsunoda, who made a mistake and therefore was excluded in Q2, while Verstappen manages very well how fluid he is in driving, guys. It's sensational, and we go on. Even here, he manages to be very fluid. Let's go on, and with the lap, we observe an incredibly fast curve insertion, and it's remarkable how he manages to navigate it without even the slightest movement. On the other hand, steering, he uses the cord well in this case, and then we go on towards this very difficult curve, where Ferrari has struggled a lot, curve 9 before the hairpin, and this curve here must have a good front end, be precise in insertion, and look here, when it goes to widen, it goes to exploit all the curb. Something incredible also here, Verstappen. Let's continue. I want to show you the hairpin. It enters very wide and remains quite wide. Here it has a bit of understeer in my opinion, and can't take the curve as well as the McLaren. It also exploits the external curb. We go on towards the spoon, the curve that has put Ferrari in more difficulty. At the entrance, they are all very similar. They enter steer after the 54.68 yard sign, giving a direct input. Max exploits the external curb a lot, something many drivers don't do. He manages to be very close to the curb, fundamental point. Max gives a lot of steering angle, being precise. But at the same time, it does not break down, it does not have counter steering in this case, and then it manages to give full gas and have a higher exit speed compared to the others. And look here too, it exploits all the external curb and already has the steering straight on exit. And this allows you to have more speed, and more speed on exit from the spoon allows you to have more speed also towards the 130R, and therefore this stretch here gains a lot in terms of gap towards the opponents. Let's go on, well, to 130R. Guys, curve that is done in full with these cars now is a flat curve, and we go towards the last chicane. Here comes the miracle of Max, if we want. Here is where he made the difference, because before this point he was a tenth of a sack of the opponents. After this chicane he managed to lower by 12 thousandths on the McLaren, so let's see for a moment how he faces it and where Max manages to make the difference. Max arrives here in braking. We see that he exploits a lot the internal cord, even going on the green, but the single seater does not break down so much. And look here, the movement he makes in the middle of the curve between one curve and the other is sensational. Look, he manages to move the steering immediately without having counter steering, without having an unstable rear. In this case, he directs it well on the curb, and also on exit, the single seater manages to remain stable. This is the real difference Red Bull and Max Verstappen make compared to their opponents. It remained very stable in facing the curbs, which is historically one of Red Bull's weak points. And in this case, look at how well Max manages to do. And also in this case, most of the drivers made very tight trajectories here on exit, just like Max, to cover fewer meters. And even here, he managed to make this trajectory that he allowed him to take home the pole position. Max's lap was great, and I want you to hear the celebration at the end too. A celebration not so much in Max's style. We usually remember the lovely that Max always uses, but in this case it was a real lion celebration, which is also his sign if we want, his animal. So a great celebration with real determination, let's say. A very, very beautiful celebration by Max. In this case it was him who made the difference, not the car. So a lot of stuff this, and now let's look at the telemetry. I want to do the telemetry to show you the difference between Verstappen and McLaren, but also let's look at the difference between Ferrari and Mercedes. So, We need to see first I'll show you the sectors so I can show you what I was telling you before, the difference in sectors between the various drivers, which is not so pronounced, let's say, towards Max and McLaren, but we see that McLaren is strong in every sector. In the first sector, Norris has the best time and Max has the third place. And Norris in the second sector are flying, McLaren in the second sector is flying. Piastri is third with a McLaren leading, but Verstappen still makes the difference on average. He combined his best sectors in the lap time, securing pole position. These are the absolute best sectors. There's also this to say, and so they really show us the performance of the single-seaters themselves. If we want, Ferrari 2 is the one that mainly struggles more. Yes, it loses quite a bit in the first and last sectors, especially in the last short sector with Hamilton and the final chicane, but not so much in the second sector in my opinion. However, it is a pity we saw Ferrari struggling a bit in the first sector's initial snake and the last sector's hairpin and final chicane. Ferrari struggles more in those slow turns. Let's also look at the telemetry together to make a comparison between the various drivers, and the thing that seems a bit alarming, in quotes, is that Leclerc managed to take that fourth position also thanks to a mistake by Russell. In fact, if we see, I want to show you first only the difference between Leclerc and Russell, and then we go to see, we also add Verstappen and Norris. But if we see Leclerc and Russell, we see that Russell makes a huge mistake. Coming out of turn 2, you see that before the snake, he really loses a lot, loses about 2/10 for this mistake, this counter steering he committed. Then he recovers and lowers a lot in lap time. Russell, you see that he even gets to 2/10 under in the central sector, and then loses in the last sector where he struggles a bit more. Mercedes also, compared to Ferrari, struggles a bit more even at the last chicane. Let's say that Mercedes struggles even more in slow corners, more than Ferrari, but it's very strong in fast corners, in support corners where you need to have little steering angle. There, Mercedes is stronger even compared to Ferrari, and in the snake we see that it makes the difference. And Russell also made it, but in the end Leclerc still managed to stay ahead. He didn't make major mistakes. Leclerc said he had a good lap, in fact a great lap, compared to Hamilton, who had a bit more understeer. He made more mistakes. So we see a Ferrari that is now the third force, but be careful because Mercedes is very close, and in this case could even be ahead. So today, in my opinion, we were also lucky with Leclerc, if we want, who was ahead of Russell and also Antonelli, because Russell could even be ahead of him. Let's see the difference between Verstappen and Norris, and then let's also compare Leclerc and Russell together. First, we make the difference only with Verstappen and Norris, 1.26.9. For Verstappen, 1.26.9, also for Norris, but almost a 27.0. We see that Verstappen has a slightly lighter single-seater compared to... Sorry, the Red Bull is lighter compared to the McLaren because it reaches a higher top speed, 323 km/h for Verstappen, 320 for Norris, and we go on. In curve 1, McLaren manages to have more grip, and we also see in the snake that it manages to have a higher speed of travel, but Verstappen attacks more on entry. You see that Verstappen enters stronger than Norris, but Norris has a higher speed of travel and also manages to do better on exit. We also see here how much he loses. In fact, in the central sector, Norris is also below compared to Verstappen's time. He manages to go very fast in the speed of travel, but look here. Here Max made a huge difference. Huge, 8.1 miles the difference between Verstappen. Norris at the curve entrance, something incredible. This is curve 9, curve 8 and 9 before the hairpin. So you can see that Verstappen manages to enter much stronger with a very pointy front end, therefore very precise with an unstable rear end, but he manages to handle it anyway on exit. On the curve exit, generally McLaren goes stronger than Red Bull also because it has more grip on exit, it has more traction as well, and therefore more mechanical grip, and therefore manages to go stronger. So we see that the main difference, even if we also look towards the last sector, is incredible how Norris was under by almost 2/10 before the last chicane. In the last chicane, Verstappen really braked very hard on entry and made a big difference compared to Norris. I'll show again the last chicane, which is the point where he made the most difference. Max, and it's worth reviewing it together and analyzing it again. And see exactly how he manages to come in so strong, because it's something really astonishing. So let's look at it together again. Both curve 9 here, then curve 8, we go ahead, here it is. Let's turn down the volume for a moment here. It's incredible. He manages to brake very hard without locking up and enters much stronger in this case compared to Norris. Let's check the front tire to ensure it doesn't lock up. I don't believe it does a micro lock. No, it doesn't lock up. It manages to be very precise in insertion, going close to the curb without using it. In this case, because otherwise it would break down the car, but here it made the difference. And then the last chicane, we see the entrance, and in this case, Verstappen also entered much stronger than Norris. It's incredible how much difference there is between the two, even seeing the telemetry from before. So a lot of stuff this lap from Max, and now we are going to see the difference on the telemetry between Verstappen, Norris and Leclerc and Russell all together. Let's see a bit the difference on the lap time, and we see how Ferrari loses a lot in the first sector and in the last, but in particular, if you see the line of the gap of the delta time, you see how both Ferrari and Mercedes lose to Red Bull and McLaren in the slow corners. Then we said Mercedes loses more than Ferrari in the slow corners. Here at the hairpin, it is clearly seen how much they really lose. They arrive at the center of the hairpin with Mercedes, which is even under 2/10, Ferrari at 59 thousandths out of the hairpin. Ferrari is over 2/10 and Mercedes is over 80 thousandths. So they really lose a lot inside the hairpin for a different trajectory they then obviously make. Ferrari and Mercedes enter corners stronger but exit slower, losing significantly at the hairpin exit. Because then there's the stretch that leads to the spoon, and there they lose a lot in traction and acceleration. This also occurs at the final chicane where the delta time is displayed. Drivers lose significant time here. Even Norris lost a lot. Norris probably didn't perform well on this lap as he lost significant time. But let's see how Vesta outperformed everyone else in the last chicane. He did something exceptional. I just want to see the braking, because in braking we see that Norris was the most conservative, the one who braked a bit earlier. Maybe he could brake harder and he would have also made the pole position, but here Max made a difference on everyone. And so making a general summary, so we see a McLaren that remains the first force because it's Max who made the difference on this lap, but McLaren remains the car to beat and is the #1 candidate to win tomorrow. Be careful, because it's true it's more charged, it has a bit more aerodynamic resistance in the straights, a bit less top speed, but it remains the favorite. If we also look at, for example, the idea at uptime, I'll show you together, I put from this side, we see that the two McLarens are in front, so McLaren remains the favorite. Verstappen's masterful lap secured him pole position. He aims to win, especially as it's Honda's celebratory Grand Prix. It's the final year of the partnership. Despite the white livery, it will be challenging for Verstappen to secure the victory. McLaren is the favorite, in my opinion. Verstappen could still finish on the podium. He is very favored for that, and Leclerc will have to try to bring home the maximum. In my opinion, a podium would already be a big deal for Ferrari. It's already very difficult, but in my opinion, Ferrari needs to be more careful with those behind, namely Russell, Antonelli, also because Leclerc is in 4th position, but a bit alone, because behind him he has both Mercedes who might try a different strategy and try to outsmart him. So Leclerc needs to be more careful behind than looking ahead, because in my opinion McLaren and even Verstappen starting in pole are the favorites to get to the podium. But also tell me what you think. I'll show you this graphic again to show you that Hamilton's uptime idea was much lower. This reflects his statements, which he also said earlier, and he said I didn't have a good lap, the car understeers, so I wasn't able to do my best. And he could still gain a position by finishing 6th. But no, so sorry, yes. He could have finished 6th, but instead he finished 8th. It's a shame for Hamilton because he could have had a better lap, but he's still not comfortable with the car. It needs updates. Another thing that Hamilton said, very important, that I'll also show you with some images, is that the Ferrari runs a bit higher. Compared to the opponents, after the China Grand Prix as well, we saw a Ferrari with a higher ground clearance. This also means the Venturi channels generate reduced aerodynamic load. And they did this after the disqualification that came in the China Grand Prix for excessive skid consumption. And this is a shame because it means that Ferrari is not making the most of it. The car is making the most of the package it has now, but the package it has now is a modified car, following the very strict regulations on ground clearance and everything else. So it's a bit of a constraint that Ferrari has to use the car with this ground clearance. While, for example, Red Bull manages to go lower, run lower, and also better exploit the RB21 on the Venturi channels. And so this difference that Hamilton pointed out is not random, because it makes us understand how I use the car to the maximum until the sprint race. I tried to get the most out of it. The car, then we changed the setup. We went in a direction that I didn't like. And if we want now, the Ferrari is not at its best. In fact, it is a Ferrari that is trying to limit. The problems are being addressed, but the struggle continues. We will further assess the race pace management tomorrow, if Ferrari can limit the damage. Be cautious when running at higher speeds, as it reduces aerodynamic load and grip on the asphalt, leading to greater tire consumption. Keep this in mind. Detail that is not something small. We know that Suzuka has a challenging circuit on tire degradation. The hardest tires in Pirelli's range are used. So this detail is something that will influence, certainly also in tomorrow's race. We'll see how Ferrari handles it and if rain adds uncertainty. Hamilton seemed happy today. Anyway, the statements he made post-qualifying, he was not distraught. He was motivated to give his best tomorrow, but obviously his goal today was to get into Q3. He also said it in the interviews, and this is a shame. I mean, we don't want to see a Ferrari whose goal is just to get into Q3. We want to see a Ferrari up there fighting with McLaren. That's the real goal of the red team this season, and so let's say that the mood at Ferrari right now is to wait for the updates that will eventually arrive in Bahrain and improve the car, because at this moment the car is not good. Hamilton continues to suffer from understeer. Leclerc struggles with managing the car because he has counter-steering that doesn't allow him to have a smooth drive. If we saw earlier a Verstappen who is very smooth. He is decisive in his movements, but he is very smooth. He never counter-steers. Well, Ferrari has many more compared to Red Bull of these counter-steers, which are then small adjustments to the driving that, however, lead you to lose a few tenths on the track, and therefore you also lose the possibility to stay up there with the others. So this is a bit the current situation of Ferrari, and we have therefore seen a bit of a Red Bull Expo today. I didn't expect it, guys. There is such a qualification from Max. I didn't expect it. Today he really showed to be a 4-time world champion, to make a difference also towards Yuki Tsunoda, who, it's true, has his first race and his first qualification in Red Bull, but really, guys, Max today made the difference on the car. This is little but sure. And this man here, the one to his right, namely Lando Norris, must be a bit frustrated because, okay, you have a better car, Norris, you're fine because probably the world championship arises between McLaren internally, between Norris and Piastri, but you can't come second behind Max with a car that goes much less compared to yours. In my opinion, Norris made a poor impression while Verstappen delivered a masterpiece. You know, Max isn't one of my favorite drivers, but I admire his driving style. As a person, I don't identify with him much, but credit must be given when it's due. In this case, Max made the difference with a masterpiece of a lap. Congratulations to him for a great performance. I also want to show the very last thing that saved me, how much the drivers have improved from Q1 to Q3, and here we find the same problem with Ferrari, that in Q1 is very close to the opponents, in particular to Verstappen, and instead, as the sessions go on and the others improve from Q1 to Q3, and instead Ferrari remains very still with the improvement in line with Mercedes, which also does not improve, while McLaren and Red Bull improve their lap much more from Q1, Q2, and Q3. This fact is interesting as it emerges from the start of the season and is a recurring theme. At the beginning, Ferrari seemed even stronger in free practice, outperforming everyone. However, they struggled significantly in qualifications, especially in Q3. We observed this pattern again today. So let me know in the comments your prediction for tomorrow's race according to you. What race can Ferrari do? Can it manage to aim for the podium with Leclerc? What race will Hamilton also do in comeback from the 8th position? Tell me a bit your opinion in the comments. I am curious to read and respond to everyone. As always, if you liked the video, please leave a like, subscribe, activate the notifications so you don't miss any Formula 1 themed update and specifically Ferrari themed. I've shared some related videos. That's all for now. Remember, the race is on Sunday at 7 ante Meridium, so I'm excited to see how it goes and the field values in this third race of the season. See you in the next video.